Okay, so in this video, we are going to take a look at completing the square. We're going to split that up into two different videos. Our first video is we'll look at the introduction to why we're completing the square and the starting points. So our goal for this is to create a perfect square trinomial. For example, 9x squared minus 42x plus 49 is a perfect square trinomial. It has two perfect squares at the beginning and the end. And when you factor it, you get the exact same parentheses twice. Hence why you can rewrite it as the parentheses squared. That's going to help us with a solving technique that's a little bit different than what we've done previously. So the first thing we'll take a look at is finding the value that completes the square, and how do we do that? This is the end part of our process for completing the square. So our steps are going to be divide b by 2. And b is our middle number here. Remember, it's ax squared plus bx plus c. So we'll just take a look at two formats of this. Here is my b, or my middle term. I'll divide that by 2. I get an answer of 3. And then we are going to take that answer and square the result. And that's going to be the value that completes the square, because we will end up with a perfect square at the end. So I'm going to square this. That's my step 2. So the value that would take the place of c in this equation is 9. And then another version of this would be x squared minus 14x plus a blank space. Same idea though, we're still going to divide that middle by 2. We get -7. It's important to record it as a -7 because we're going to use that as part of our factoring process later. And then we square it, and we get a perfect square value of 49 that would technically get filled into that blank space. So if you're asked to find the value that completes the square, that is all that you do. Our second section, the directions are going to say find the value that completes the square and write your answer in factored form. So that takes us to our next step of our completing the square process. All right, so what we want to do is same thing we did on the previous examples. This will be x squared minus 10x. We're going to divide by 2. We get an answer of -5. And then we'll square that answer. So technically, our perfect square trinomial would be x squared minus 10x plus 25 That plus 25 is the value that completes the square or makes our perfect square trinomial. Again, if you were just doing that part, that would be all that you would enter in that space. Now, if I want to factor this, I'm going to do my old school factoring and do factors of 25. That will add up to 10. That's going to be 5 times 5. And then because of the negative sign in the middle, we want to do a -5 and a -5. Notice there's a -5 here. So in the future, we can completely skip this step and always go to 1 parentheses squared and then do that x minus 5 and steal that from our completing the square process. Let me just fix my 5 a little bit there. So this would be the factored form. And that takes us through like the almost end part of the completing the square that we will then use to solve. So we're going to do one more component for this video, and it's going to be how to solve an equation that ends up in this format before we put everything together and do that completing the square process. Okay, so again, this is going to be the second half of our process. The first half is the completing the square part. To solve this, we could multiply this out, get it equal to 0, and do our factoring. But sometimes this method will work for things that don't factor. So what we want to do here is we are going to take the square root of both sides. So we're going to take the square root. Should have written the information in first to get rid of the squared. Now you have to be careful when you do this method. Think to yourself right now, what happens when I take the square root of a number? I get 2 answers. So I'm going to set this equal to +4 and -4, just like our quadratic formula and our factoring and solving with the calculator. If we've done all those methods already, we were always getting 2 factors or 2 answers. The same thing applies here. And then we finish up our solving process. We get x is 9, or x is equal to 1. We still get our 2 answers, but a slightly different way. We're not needing to get our equation equal to 0. And then this will work for ones that maybe do factor and cancel, not factor and cancel. Maybe they factor. Maybe you can only do it with quadratic formula, but you could also do it with completing the square now as another option. So that's going to end this first video, and in our second video we will take a look at the entire process and put this all together to complete the square.